For some reason this week I was thinking about an experience I had, I guess about 5 years ago at this point. It was very near the end of my time in ministry. Matter of fact, it may have been the very last funeral I had ever done. And I had a stretch of time of several months where I was doing a number of funerals for people, for men in particular, who were younger than myself and all had taken their life, overdosed, died tragically one way or the other. And if if you've been in that situation where people younger than yourself die, it does something. I think it does something to the mind that really makes you look at life differently. And the very last one I had was someone I did not know at all. And it happened to be the friend of someone else I did know, and they had no one to do a service for them, so I agreed to do it. The guy was 26 years old, 26 and overdosed. And I've often been amazed at the times when I've had funerals like that. It's they're they're very unique people, and people, I know for myself, it's very easy to kind of get swallowed up in the pain of life, that we don't know what to do with it. It just has a way of encompassing everything, the way we view life. And I've often wondered, like, what's going through the mind of someone like that, that they would finally get pushed over the edge where they would have to take their own life, because it just logically it just seems illogical. It may be no other way of describing it. And 26 years old, and described in a way of having this larger than life personality, just like big person in that way. And I've seen it before, where people have died tragically, have very similar personalities. And the older I get, the more I realize so much is in direct correlation to what we're experiencing on the inside of our lives. And I think as people, as humans, we don't always know what to do with it as things begin to surface. And we think we have to tough it out. We think we have to suck it up. We know all the sayings. We've been told those things over the course of our lives, and for some it ends tragically in that way, because that you can only suck it up for so long before it just encompasses everything about your life. And how does a person experience so much darkness and despair that the only solution is out, is to leave, is to take one's life? And I don't even know what made me think of it this week, other than this question of mortality, which comes up regularly. And I happened to be watching a friend's video just earlier today. Same kind of thing. I'd found someone dead, watched his father die, and then what do you do? How do you deal with grief? I think it often comes down to grief. I had the chance to teach a class, one that I don't think I was prepared to teach, but I did it because it was considered a philosophy class, and because I had a background in ministry, they had asked me to do it. But it was a class along the lines of death and dying, and a lot of the conversation revolved around grief. And we don't have the words often to describe what is going on inside us when grief is real. I don't even know if we would call it grief. We know sadness, we know depression, we know feeling down, we know feeling blue. We have lots of things that we use to describe it. But grief, and those stages of grief that we have often become known to understand, is hard to go through alone. And maybe the biggest lie that we tell ourselves is that when we are feeling down, when we are experiencing grief, and I think, in my experience of my own life, grief is just a, is almost a daily experience that we go through. Like we're always letting go of something. Something is always dying within us or around us that is always challenging this idea that I can live forever. That it's down the road. I don't have to worry about it right now. That we think there's always another day. And more often than not, there is. But eventually, there isn't. It's, again, just the nature of who we are as people. And what do we do with that grief? That grief holds us back so much. I still think, I'm still a believer that our whole experience of COVID for that year and beyond put grief at the center of who we are as people, at the center of our humanity. And we also saw how clunky it was and how horribly we dealt with it at times. Because our natural inclination as a man, I'll say as a man, I don't know about for all of us, is to try to get through it as quick as possible. Like, let's just get to the other side. Can we take the beltway around in order to get to where we want to go and just not deal with this pain thing? And at the same time, I've learned that pain often has life's greatest lessons attached to it. I know that for myself, just things I find myself dealing with at this very moment in my life, that it would be easy to just try to move beyond it, to ignore it, to suck it up, rather than to recognize something in this moment is trying to die within me as well. And in that death, something else will be born. For us, though, we don't know always what that is about to be born or is trying to be birthed within us. And so we hold on to the pain, we hold on to the grief and avoid it, or find ways to deal with it. Alcohol, other means that people have used to deal with grief. Simply because it's hard for us to face the unknown. And that unknown is what's trying to be birthed in us at that moment. But if what I know is pain, no matter how big it may feel within me, I'd still prefer what I know than to let it go and be opened up to something new, opened up to something that is trying to be birthed within me. Life isn't meant to stay the same. It's not meant to stay in this moment. It's evolving, it's changing, just as it is for us. And so I think in many ways, that experience of COVID kind of put in our faces just how horribly we deal with pain and suffering. And in my experience, it's such a big teacher in our lives that we have to be willing to confront. There's a saying out there, learn to die before you die. Like, we're given little deaths along the way of things that we could be letting go of in our lives, thoughts, beliefs, fears, angers, resentments, everything else that we have a tendency to hold on to, are invitations to these smaller deaths. And the more that we face these smaller deaths and learn to let go, the more the big death, the death at the end of our lives, doesn't have to be fought. And I have seen enough people at the end of their life fighting that reality, just not wanting to let go. And it's an indication that over the course of their life, they probably have done the same. And so all of this of talking about mortality and grief and life and death is an invitation. Am I able and willing to let go of what needs to die in my own life? And I'm not always willing. I'm not always ready. There is a moment of accepting this is what is. And I think in that moment of accepting what is, the door to let go finally begins to open. And so rather than looking at it as what do I need to let go of and what needs to die in my life, which seems dramatic, we can begin to view it in a different way, look at it in a different way, that it might not be as dramatic as much as it is accepting what is. Can I accept that this is where I'm at in the moment? And when we could accept that this is where I'm at in the moment, it begins to fade, it begins to lose its power. We can begin to be in the present moment, look towards the future, and not see them as separate stages that we're going through, but rather this is, it can happen so quickly simply by saying, this is what is. This is what is. And can I accept that in that moment? And so there's so much grief and there's so much pain in our world. And as someone who has taken it on so often for other people at times, sometimes unbeknownst to myself, it could be so transformative when we learn to accept it, learn to accept that it is. And in that moment of acceptance, our view of the world, our view of our own life begins to change, because I could finally begin to let go of what has been holding me back from living the life that I really want, or the life that may be summoned from within me in this moment, that is saying, here's where you go. This is the life you're meant to live. And it's okay to let go.